Happy Mother's Day to your mom. That's right. Tell your mom I said Happy Mother's Day. And hopefully you have already told them that today. Today is going to be a little bit different from what we normally do. I had something that I was really thinking about and really wanting to share with you guys. So I'm going to keep it as brief as possible. Just to let you know, if you hadn't joined us last Tuesday, we had Taco Tuesday. It was our talent show. It was pretty awesome. If you haven't seen it yet, you can see it here. But let's get on with it. First of all, this disease and the damage it caused, I hate that. I hate the pain that it has caused people. I hate the death that it has caused. I hate the sickness and the complications that it's caused and the chaos. I hate the anxiety it has brought people. I hate the jobs that have been lost. I hate the way it is dividing our country instead of uniting it. I hate the way it is causing so many adults in your life, in my life, to act like 2-year-olds. And if you've heard me teach before, you know how I feel about 2-year-olds. I hate how it is disproportionately affecting poorer communities. And I hate the fear that it has spread. And when it comes to quarantine, I want you to know, I hate that you can't see your friends right now. That is killing me, and I know it's killing you. And I hate that you've missed out on some memories with this school year. I hate that I have no idea when I'm going to see my mom again. I hate that some of you are seniors and you're going to miss graduation. I would rather that none of this had ever happened. I really would, but it did. I'd rather that I could make it go away, but I can't. Since we can't go back, I have to begin where we're at right now. How could this ever be a gift to be at home a little longer? Well, to see the gift that quarantine could give with the time that we have left, I want to take a note from Joseph. I want to look at his story. We've been diving into his story. Joseph had a successful future in store for him. He was extremely talented and extremely skilled. He could see things in a way that nobody else could. He could dream about the future in a way that other people were jealous of. And then it all went wrong. Even when he did the right thing. He went from the pasture to the pit to being Potiphar's slave, and then he got thrown in prison. I'm actually going to skip forward a little bit. I'm going to start in Genesis 41. It talks about a guy named Pharaoh. He was the ruler of Egypt. One night he had a nightmare. 7 fat cows came out of a river, and then 7 skinny cows came up and ate it. But Pharaoh knew that this dream meant something, and it troubled him greatly. So he asked everybody around, all the wisest people he knew, all the philosophers, the magicians, maybe even he asked Jafar. Just kidding. Nobody knew, though, and he was super troubled about it, and he didn't know what to do. Soon after that, his cupbearer, the guy who brought him he brought him his drinks throughout the day, he overheard Pharaoh's dream, and he had a flashback. 2 years earlier, that servant had a really rough day. I don't know if maybe he burnt the spinach puffs or something, but he made Pharaoh mad, and Pharaoh threw him into prison. Permanent quarantine. He wasn't leaving until he was dead. When the cupbearer went to prison, instead of being in charge of being placed under the charge of a guard, he was put under the charge of another prisoner. This Hebrew servant who was in jail was in charge of the whole prison. And Joseph, he found out, was actually a pretty caring guy. How do we know? Because one of the nights, the cupbearer had a nightmare. And Joseph, instead of ignoring him, instead of saying, wow, that sucks, or instead of beating him for talking, Joseph leaned in and asked him about it. And then this Joseph guy, he said that his God told him what it meant. He said, don't worry, you're going to get your job back soon. And when you do, just don't forget this time and don't forget me. Actually, that's what happened. He got his job back. His world went back to normal. But he did forget that time, which meant he did forget Joseph. The other week, I told you on the stream about a time that I got pulled over. I got off. I didn't get a ticket, which was amazing. I just got a warning. And I remember praying the whole time, Lord, I will never speed again. Just 2 days later, I was already driving back at the same speeds that I was before. We don't aim to be, but we really are forgetful creatures. And I think it's somewhere between the tightly drawn tension between the cupbearer, the forgetfulness of the cupbearer, and the faithfulness of Joseph that we find ourselves either forgetting or remembering. The cupbearer in the story faced life-altering circumstances. He has that dream in the middle of prison. He doesn't know what to do, so what does he do? He just decides he's going to ride the wave. He's going to bide his time. And somebody else, Joseph, helps him take his next step. And eventually, the cupbearer is out and things go back to normal. But see, Joseph also faces the same life life-altering circumstances as this guy. In fact, his was probably a little worse because he didn't ask for it. And what does Joseph do that's different from him? Well, instead of just riding the wave, instead of just biding his time, he embraces integrity. He does what's right even while he's in prison. He uses the gifts he's good at even while he's in prison. He intentionally hones his craft. He intentionally connects with God. He intentionally serves somebody else and brings hope to somebody else even when things suck. It said that the warden had put Joseph in charge of the prison because of the way that he lived. He's faithful. He remembers God. He remembers what really matters. Does it all pay off right away? No. Eventually. Because 2 years later, this guy, cupbearer, and while Pharaoh's talking, he remembers faithful Joseph. I've heard this story a lot growing up. It never really dawned on me that Pharaoh didn't know who Joseph was. We know who Joseph is. He's the main person in this story. He was just a slave. I wish I could peek in on that conversation. Because I imagine it going something like this. Hey, Pharaoh, remember that one time? Awkward story 2 years ago. You threw me into prison for good times. When I was in there, I did meet this guy, this slave named Joseph, who heard my nightmares and my dreams and told me I'd be back here, and I am. So what if I ask him? Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, and in a very quick turn, God gives him wisdom and tells him, hey, those 7 cows are 7 good years, followed by 7 skinny cows, which are bad years, which guess what? That's famine. So we need to prepare. So Pharaoh puts Joseph, takes him out of prison and puts him in charge of the entire nation. See, that time spent being faithful and full of integrity and being intentional eventually paid off. This is why I'm not sad about us getting a little more time before life starts to go back to normal. See, over the past 2 years, I've been asking you about your life. Many of you have said things like, I'm so busy, or I'm super stressed, or, I'm just really tired. And many of you have said, I wish I had strong community. I wish I had great friends who would help me out. I wish I could use my gifts, or I wish I could have time to serve more, or I wish this, I wish I knew God more, I wish that. Then I'd ask you why you aren't able to pursue things the way you want to. Almost every single time, your answer, no matter who you are, has been, I would really love to, I just don't have time. My friends, I am so proud of you. Seriously, I am so proud of the things you do. You guys have done more than in your few years than I have done in my entire life. You are really good at doing things, but there's danger. I know a lot of people who do a lot, but when they don't know what to do, their lives falter or even crash because they never learned how to be. So here's your bottom line. If you take the time to learn how to be, then when the time comes, you're going to know what to do. And learning how to be present, how to be with God, how to be the person you're called to be and the person He's wired you to be. When you take the time to invest in that above everything else, then you will know what to do when you need it. And you'll know even greater what He is calling you to do. The things that eat up our free time and our rest time, they've been quarantined too. Our 7-day-a-week leagues, they've been put on hold. Our classes have been paused. Our tests have been moved. Our practices have been halted. Guess what we're realizing? We're okay. See, right now, your ability to do things has been limited. But see, many of you are noticing, though, in the place of your overfilled schedules, you're learning how to be. How do I know this? Because I've been asking you. I gotta tell you, I have loved coming to see you guys at your house. Just being able to see your face, just being able to say hi from a distance. Besides being stir crazy, besides missing your friends, which is what we're all doing, what I'm noticing is that many of you are getting rest. Many of you are less anxious or less worried or less stressed than you were before. I mean, there's other stresses, but still, it's less. Many of you are learning how to enjoy your family. Many of you are learning new things about yourself, picking up new habits and new traits and new abilities that you didn't know you had. Seriously, I have the footage to prove it. I know this feels like forever, but it isn't. Our world is eventually going to pick back up again. But before it does, you have time to make a choice. See, you can choose to live like the cupbearer. You can choose to just ride the wave. You can choose for it to get back to normal. You pine for the day that you get your crazy schedule back. If you do that though, chances are good you're going to forget a lot of the things that you've learned in this time. Or you, me, we can live like Joseph. With this time we have left, we can use integrity. We can do what's right, including the time when no one else is watching us. And secondly, we can use intentionality. So here's what you can do. I want you to write down what you want to do. Yes, those things that you've always said you wanted to do, but you didn't have time to before. Write that down, maybe it's creating a healthy friend circle. Maybe you don't have one, or it's not healthy, but you've always wanted one. Write that down. Maybe it's honing a skill or a gift or an ability that God has given you. Maybe it's serving or helping somebody else. Maybe it's meeting a neighbor. Maybe it's picking up a habit for connecting with God in a way that works for you. And then write down, what do you think God has been calling you to do? What's that nudge? What's that dream that you have? What is the idea that's inside of you? Or what's an area of your life that you haven't quite given him control over yet? Maybe it's time for you to figure out who you are, to figure out what your gifts are, to figure out your abilities, to figure out your identity in Christ. And then I want you to write down what you're grateful for in this time. Write down what you've learned. Why? So we don't forget them. Years after Joseph, kind of like his great nephew, was this guy named David. David was known as a leader who, even with his faults and failures, was a person after God's own heart. And looking back on his life and looking back in wisdom, he said, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And don't lean just on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. He will direct your paths. You see, if you just ride this out and wait for things to get back to normal, you run the risk of forgetting, and chances are good that you will. That's for all of us. But if we choose to embrace integrity and use intentionality in this time and spend our time with God and figure out what his ways are and submit them to him, you know what? Even if it doesn't pay off right now, eventually it will, and that will be the thing to help you lead. And my question to you is, why would we choose to be cupbearers when we were meant to be royalty? So may we choose to be intentional with this time. May we allow God to realign our lives and our schedules and us for our future. May we choose to invest in learning how to be, so that when the time calls for it, we will know what to do.